Your name means nothing. Build a legacy they can't erase. This truth cuts through the comfortable delusions of ego, celebrity, and the desperate human hunger for personal recognition that traps most people in cycles of seeking validation that dies with their memory, while neglecting the deeper work of creating lasting impact that transcends individual identity. I have observed countless individuals who spent their entire lives building personal brands, accumulating accolades, and ensuring their names would be remembered, only to discover that names fade within generations, while the systems, ideas, and transformations they could have created continue shaping reality long after every trace of their personal identity has been forgotten by history. The research on legacy building reveals what careful observation confirms. Lasting impact emerges not from personal recognition, but from creating value systems, institutional changes, and cultural shifts that become self-sustaining and continue generating benefits, regardless of whether anyone remembers who initiated them. The most profound legacies are often anonymous, their creators forgotten while their contributions continue serving humanity. Your name is a temporary label attached to a temporary biological form that will decay and disappear. But the ideas you plant, the systems you build, the transformations you catalyze, and the problems you solve can compound across centuries, touching millions of lives in ways that dwarf any personal achievement or recognition you might accumulate during your brief existence. Today I speak of the difference between fame and legacy, between being remembered and being transformative, between building monuments to yourself and building foundations for futures you will never see, but which will be shaped by the depth of your contribution to human capability and flourishing. The pursuit of personal recognition, whether through fame, professional reputation, social media followers, or any other form of individual acknowledgement, represents one of humanity's most seductive traps, consuming enormous energy and resources, while producing nothing of lasting value except temporary ego satisfaction that requires constant maintenance and eventually fades entirely. Personal recognition operates through what psychologists recognize as external validation dependency, the need for others' acknowledgement to maintain self-worth and identity. This dependency creates psychological fragility because your sense of value becomes contingent on others' attention, memory, and approval, all of which are fundamentally unreliable and temporary resources that can be withdrawn at any time. The vanity becomes apparent when you consider the mathematical reality of memory decay. Within one generation, most people are forgotten by everyone except their immediate family. Within 2 generations, even family members struggle to remember details about ancestors beyond basic names and dates. Within 3 generations, most individuals become completely anonymous, their personal struggles, achievements, and character traits lost to time, regardless of how significant they seem during their lifetime. This pattern holds true even for many historically famous individuals. Can you name the most celebrated actors from 1850? The most admired politicians from 1750, the most popular writers from 1650. Time erases personal recognition with mechanical efficiency, while the systems, technologies, and ideas created by anonymous individuals continue shaping daily life in ways their creators never could have imagined. The energy spent building personal brands, managing reputations, and seeking recognition represents massive opportunity cost. Resources that could have been directed toward creating lasting value, solving meaningful problems, or building systems that continue generating benefits long after their creators are forgotten. Every hour spent on personal promotion is an hour not spent on work that could compound across decades or centuries. Perhaps most tragically, the focus on personal recognition often corrupts the very work that could create lasting legacy. When you're concerned with getting credit, you may avoid collaboration that could amplify impact. When you're focused on individual achievement, you may neglect systemic solutions that require multiple generations to implement. When you're building your name, you're not building the anonymous infrastructure that actually changes the world. True legacy operates through compound effects that multiply impact across time, creating exponential returns on initial investments of effort, resources, and intelligence that continue generating benefits long after the original contribution has been forgotten. Understanding these mathematics helps shift focus from personal recognition to systemic transformation. Compound impact works like compound interest. Small initial contributions that address fundamental problems or create valuable capabilities grow exponentially as they interact with other systems and are built upon by subsequent generations. The anonymous inventor of double-entry bookkeeping created more lasting wealth than most famous entrepreneurs. The forgotten programmer who developed key algorithms enables billions of daily transactions. The unnamed teacher whose methods influenced educational approaches touches millions of lives across centuries. Network effects amplify legacy by creating systems where each new participant increases value for all existing participants. The person who establishes communication protocols, educational frameworks, or social institutions creates platforms that become more valuable as more people use them, generating increasing returns that compound over time without requiring ongoing input from the original creator. Systemic leverage allows small changes in key leverage points to create massive downstream effects. The individual who influences legal frameworks, cultural norms, or technological standards may impact billions of decisions made by people who never learn their name, but whose lives are shaped by systems they helped establish or modify. The mathematics become clear when you consider that lasting impact is measured not by how many people know your name, but by how many people benefit from your contributions. An anonymous researcher, whose work leads to medical breakthroughs, may save more lives than any famous doctor. An unknown engineer who designs better infrastructure may improve more daily experiences than any celebrated architect. Time horizons reveal the true mathematics of legacy. Personal recognition typically peaks during lifetime and decays rapidly after death. But systemic contributions often show the opposite pattern: minimal recognition during the creator's lifetime followed by exponentially increasing impact as systems mature and compound over decades or centuries. The key insight is that lasting legacy requires optimizing for cumulative impact rather than immediate recognition, for systemic change rather than personal credit, for problems solved rather than achievements acknowledged. This optimization demands different strategies, different metrics, and fundamentally different definitions of success than those that drive recognition-seeking behavior. The most powerful legacies are built through creating self-sustaining systems, frameworks, institutions, processes, and structures that continue operating and evolving without requiring ongoing input from their creators, generating increasing value as they mature and adapt to changing circumstances over time. Educational systems represent one model of lasting legacy. The person who develops effective teaching methods, curriculum frameworks, or learning technologies creates tools that can improve millions of educational experiences across generations. These systems become embedded in institutional practices and continue generating benefits regardless of whether anyone remembers who originally developed them. Legal and regulatory frameworks provide another model. The individual who helps establish laws, procedures, or institutional processes that protect rights, prevent abuses, or enable beneficial activities creates structures that influence billions of decisions and transactions. These frameworks become part of civilization's operating system, shaping behavior and outcomes across centuries. Technological systems offer perhaps the most obvious examples of lasting legacy. The engineers and programmers who develop foundational technologies, communication protocols, or software architectures create infrastructure that enables countless future innovations. Their specific contributions become invisible as they're integrated into larger systems, but their impact compounds as new capabilities are built on their foundations. Cultural systems, including social norms, artistic traditions, and intellectual frameworks, represent subtler but equally powerful forms of lasting legacy. The person who influences how people think about problems, relate to each other, or understand their place in the world creates changes that propagate through social networks and across generations, often becoming so fundamental that they're taken for granted rather than attributed to specific originators. The key to building lasting systems is focusing on problems that will remain relevant across time horizons longer than individual lifetimes. Human needs for communication, education, health, security, and meaning-making persist across cultures and centuries. Systems that address these fundamental needs in more effective ways create value that compounds regardless of changing surface conditions. Effective legacy systems also include mechanisms for evolution and adaptation. The most lasting contributions are not fixed solutions, but frameworks that enable better solutions to emerge over time. They provide structure while maintaining flexibility, establish principles while allowing tactical adaptation, and create platforms that enable innovation rather than constraining it. The greatest influence often operates anonymously, shaping reality through ideas, frameworks, and systems that become so fundamental to human experience that their origins are forgotten while their effects continue determining how billions of people think, act, and organize their lives. This paradox emerges because the most profound contributions become invisible through integration. When an idea becomes obviously true, when a system becomes indispensable infrastructure, when a framework becomes the natural way of approaching problems, the specific person who originated these contributions fades from memory, while their influence becomes universal and permanent. Language provides the clearest example. The individuals who developed grammatical structures, vocabulary frameworks, and communication conventions that enable all subsequent discourse remain completely anonymous, yet their contributions make every conversation, every written work, and every transmitted thought possible. Their influence is absolute and eternal, while their recognition is zero. Mathematical and scientific frameworks follow similar patterns. The person who developed the number systems that enable all subsequent calculation, the logical structures that enable all subsequent reasoning, or the measurement standards that enable all subsequent precision work created tools that shape every technological and intellectual achievement, yet their names are lost to history, while their contributions remain essential. Social and cultural frameworks operate through the same paradox. The individuals who established customs, norms, and practices that enable cooperation, reduce conflict, and organize social activity created the invisible infrastructure that makes civilization possible, but their specific contributions are absorbed into cultural common sense, rather than remembered as individual achievements. The paradox reveals why recognition seeking often undermines lasting influence. When you're focused on getting credit, you may avoid contributing to collective efforts, where individual contributions become indistinguishable. When you're building your personal brand, you may neglect anonymous infrastructure work that could have massive compound effects. Understanding this paradox liberates you from the need for personal recognition, while highlighting the extraordinary opportunity to influence reality through contributions that become so valuable. They're integrated into humanity's basic operating systems. Your name may disappear, but your influence can become permanent and universal. The highest form of power is influence so complete that it becomes invisible, so fundamental that it's taken for granted, so integrated that it shapes reality without anyone needing to remember its origin. This is the power available to those willing to build legacy rather than recognition, systems rather than reputation, lasting value rather than temporary fame. Building legacy that transcends individual memory requires strategic thinking about problems worth solving, systems worth building, and contributions that will compound across time horizons longer than individual lifetimes. This involves fundamentally different approaches than those used for building personal recognition or career advancement. Problem selection becomes crucial because lasting legacy emerges from addressing challenges that remain relevant across decades or centuries. Focus on fundamental human needs that persist, regardless of changing surface conditions. Better ways to learn, communicate, cooperate, stay healthy, create meaning, or organize social activity. These evergreen problems offer opportunities for contributions that compound across generations. Solution architecture should emphasize frameworks rather than fixed answers, principles rather than specific procedures, and platforms that enable innovation rather than completed products. The most lasting contributions create capacity for others to build better solutions, rather than providing final solutions that become obsolete as conditions change. Implementation strategy must account for adoption patterns and scaling mechanisms that don't depend on your continued involvement. The best legacy systems include built-in incentives for others to maintain, improve, and propagate them. They create value for users, while creating reasons for participants to extend and refine the systems over time. Documentation and knowledge transfer become essential for ensuring that valuable contributions survive their creators and can be built upon by subsequent generations. This means creating clear explanations, teaching methods, and institutional knowledge that enable others to understand, maintain, and improve upon your work. Institutional embedding helps ensure that valuable systems survive changes in leadership, funding, and priorities. The most lasting legacies become integrated into organizations, procedures, and cultural practices that have their own survival mechanisms rather than depending on individual enthusiasm or memory. Measurement systems should focus on cumulative impact rather than immediate recognition. Track problems solved, capabilities created, and value generated, rather than credit received or personal acknowledgement achieved. Develop metrics that capture compound effects and systemic improvements rather than individual achievements. Perhaps most importantly, develop psychological frameworks that find satisfaction in anonymous contribution, rather than recognized achievement. Learn to derive meaning from knowledge that your work creates value regardless of whether anyone knows you created it. Find fulfillment in solving problems rather than receiving credit for solutions. The path I walked taught me that every moment spent building personal recognition was a moment not spent creating lasting value. Every effort directed toward individual fame was effort not applied to systemic transformation. Every resource consumed by ego maintenance was a resource not invested in problems that could be solved permanently rather than temporarily managed. I learned that the most profound satisfaction comes not from being remembered, but from knowing that your contributions continue generating benefits long after you're forgotten. That the problems you solved stay solved, that the capabilities you created continue enabling human flourishing across time horizons that dwarf individual existence. The research confirms what wisdom traditions have always taught. Lasting fulfillment emerges from service to purposes larger than individual identity, from contributions that transcend personal recognition, from work that improves the human condition, regardless of whether anyone remembers who did the work. Your modern world creates unprecedented opportunities for both personal recognition and lasting legacy. The same technologies that enable global fame also enable anonymous contributions to reach billions of people. The same systems that create celebrity also create platforms for systemic transformation that can compound across generations. The choice is yours. Spend your finite time and energy building a name that will be forgotten within decades, or invest those same resources in creating systems, solving problems, and building capabilities that will serve humanity long after every trace of your personal identity has dissolved into historical anonymity. Begin by identifying problems whose solutions would compound across generations, rather than require constant maintenance. Look for leverage points, where small contributions could create large systemic improvements. Focus on frameworks that enable better solutions rather than fixed answers that become obsolete. Develop satisfaction from anonymous contribution. Learn to find meaning in solving problems rather than receiving credit for solutions. Measure success by cumulative impact, rather than personal recognition. Find fulfillment in knowing that your work creates value regardless of whether anyone knows you created it. Most importantly, understand that your name is temporary, but your potential contributions are eternal. The ideas you develop, the systems you build, the problems you solve, and the capabilities you create can continue serving humanity long after biological death, makes personal recognition impossible. Your name means nothing, because names are temporary labels attached to temporary biological forms. But your potential legacy is everything, because the right contributions can improve human experience across centuries, touching millions of lives in ways that no amount of personal recognition could ever achieve. Build legacy they can't erase, not because it carries your name, but because it solves real problems, creates lasting value, and enables human capabilities that continue growing long after their origins are forgotten. In this work lies meaning that transcends individual existence and purpose that outlasts personal memory. The greatest power is influence so complete it becomes invisible, so fundamental it's taken for granted, so integrated it shapes reality, without requiring recognition. This power is available to anyone willing to build systems rather than reputation, solve problems rather than seek credit, and serve purposes larger than individual identity. Your name will disappear, your legacy can be eternal. Choose accordingly and discover that the deepest satisfaction comes not from being remembered, but from creating value that continues serving humanity long after you've been forgotten by everyone except the problems you solved and the capabilities you created.